Okay, hello, and welcome to this eSchool News webinar, Fostering Student Wellbeing with Microsoft Education Solutions. My name is Kevin Hogan. I am the editor-at-large for eSchool News, and I'm happy you're joining us today for what I know will be a very insightful and important conversation. This event is brought to you by Microsoft. Microsoft is the leading platform and productivity company for the mobile-first, cloud-first world, and its mission is to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. Learn more at microsoft.com/education. Now, before we get into the conversation, I'd like to take a minute to go over some of the features of this platform that we're using for the webinar. This event is being recorded, so you don't have to worry about missing a thing. Within a few days, you'll receive an email message that contains a link to the recorded webinar, along with a PDF of the slides. Also, you'll notice the chat function that you can launch. Feel free to use this to contact someone from the eSchool News team if you have a technical question. Also, if you have a question for the panelists or an idea or an opinion you want to share to throw into the conversation, please feel free. I feel that the more that you folks out there in the audience participate, the more valuable this conversation can be. So with these housekeeping items out of the way, let's get started and with some introductions. First, we have Tammy Dunbar. Tammy is a teacher at Lincoln Elementary in Manteca Unified, and that's in California. She's also an educational technology professor at Teachers College at San Joaquin. She is a 2019 Fulbright Teachers for Global Classrooms Fellow and the NCCE 2020 Closing Keynote Speaker. She was also the 2016 California Woman of the Year, Assembly District 12, and she won the 2021 ISTE Interactive Video Conferencing Network Classroom Educator Award. That is certainly a mouthful, and certainly a number of great awards there, Tammy. So welcome, and thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Next, we have Jennifer Reed. Jennifer is the Director of Clinical Services for Mental Health Services Department for the Dallas Independent School District in Texas. Jennifer is a first-generation college graduate and reflects her family's South Texas Latino roots in her hard work, dedication, and passion. She has a bachelor's degree in human development and family sciences and philosophy from the University of Texas at Austin, and has a master's degree in counseling from the University of North Texas. Jennifer has served in the Dallas area public schools for over 14 years as a teacher, school counselor, at-risk facilitator, and coordinator of administrative services and special programs. And last but certainly not least, Mark Sparvell, Director of Education Marketing for Microsoft. Mark is an award-winning education leader with 30 years experience guiding transformation. He is a BET Global Advisory Council member, advisor to Goldie Hawn's Mind Up Foundation, and ambassador for the Emotional Intelligence Society of Australia. As founder of SEL and EDU, which is an online community, Mark advocates for social emotional learning and carries this through his work as a Salzburg Fellow. Mark's passions have found a perfect fit at Microsoft Education, where he draws from his deep education experience to contribute to programs, products, and professional activities. So everyone, thank you so much for taking the time to share your insights with us today. I'm really looking forward to it. Now, unfortunately, as with all things, we still need to begin the conversation kind of talking in the context of our current circumstances, but I think this topic is probably one of, if not the most important issues involving educating kids today. I know that Mark, you mentioned the idea of SEL. That's one of those million acronyms that education likes to use over the years, and I would always nod politely when I'd be at a session at ISTE or BET and people would talk about SEL. I'm like, oh, of course I know what you're talking about. And it was always this kind of clearly fuzzy conceptual sort of thing. And well, 2 years ago, almost to the day, I think we all discovered that social emotional learning isn't just like a nice to have for not only education, but for our society, to where it's front and center, right? So maybe if we can get started and talk a little bit about all of your experiences, obviously all these the years that you've been, maybe global pandemics weren't at the top of the list when it came to applying the idea of social emotional learning, or more precisely here, well-being. Tammy, maybe we'll start with you. How that has changed.
How that has changed since the pandemic? Oh, my stars.
Yeah.
Well,
Like, what
actually,
is that?
it's
What does well-being
always
mean to you? Yeah.
Yeah,
Go
it's
ahead.
always been about relationships, though, hasn't it? I mean, in education,
True.
if you ever saw Rita Pearson talking about, it's all about relationships, that's what it's about. And those of us who have been in education for 20 plus years, that's always been the thing when we were in brick and mortar, to build those relationships. But we weren't really thinking about SEL. It's just, if I love my students, then I'm going to do the best for them and make sure they have ways to communicate with me if they're down, if they're happy, if they need to celebrate, if they need to cry. So, but with the pandemic, yes, it's been very different. I teach at the online academy. I have for the last 2 years in my district, and having to come up with new ways to build relationships in this kind of environment. I mean, you can't touch a student on the shoulder or, that sort of thing. However, there are some really wonderful things that have blossomed because of the technology, that now I've got these wonderful, even deeper relationships with students and their families. So yeah, it's changed, but for me, it's changed for the better, because it's easier to talk with a student one-on-one, for one example. Yeah.
Right. Right. Yeah,
Yeah,
there are some
big
kind of
changes.
interesting innovations and discoveries that have come out of this great beta test, right? Well,
Yeah.
Jennifer, let's ask you, how about what does the idea of well-being mean to you, and why does it matter so much now, especially in these times?
Yeah, I think the idea of well-being, and thank you, Kevin, for having me today and for being able to speak. But I think the idea of well-being brings about, it is a lot more complex today. I think and we have a much more complex understanding of what that was compared to 2 years ago. Well-being was sitting, reading a book, have your cup of coffee, and or spend some quiet time, whatever that could be for you. I think today we see well-being as something much more complex and deeper to our own, our own being, our own happiness. It's not just something that you do, it's something that is that has to be a part of your everyday life to really, I guess, align with what the word is, well-being, to be well. And so that's where I think, what has, to Tammy's point, been so great, unfortunately, about the pandemic. We've come to recognize well-being as being much more complex. Additionally, I think we've recognized that well-being is for everyone. It is something that is a part of not only the stressed mom or dad or person, single mom working. It is a part of children's lives. It is a part of teenagers' lives. So just really expanding what well-being is. And the challenge, I think, for all of us in this 2-year span is to catch up to that, for those of us who are in that well-being space, and to be able to reinvent how to bring well-being, make it more accessible for everyone, for the adult, for the child, in these different variety of spaces. So it's really, there's been some great positives, and continue to push us to innovate on what well-being is, really.
Yeah, and Mark, you're nodding. I assume this is resonating.
Yeah, a focus on well-being, if you like, over the last couple of years has shown us that it's foundational and it's not ornamental for success, not just in learning, but success in work and success, more broadly in life. As Jennifer said, well-being, it's kind of tricky. Because lots of things contribute to it: physical well-being, health and safety, relationships, happiness or subjective well-being. These all contribute, and well-being is much more than just the absence of ill-being. Well-being is actually when we flourish, when all of those conditions are right. And you touched on at the start, Kevin, social and emotional learning. That's a process to develop a certain set of skills which contribute to well-being. If you like, well-being is the end game, where people feel that they have voice, they have choice, they have connections, they have control over aspects of their life, which for kids at the moment, in worlds that can seem largely completely out of control with recent events in the news, over the last couple of years and the last couple of weeks. At the moment, it's a critical agenda that our young people feel a sense of control.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's get into the nitty gritty of it a little bit here. So how this, we're talking very big picture. Tammy, how do these big picture ideas get implemented into the classroom? And more specifically, how does an inclusive classroom support this general idea of well-being in your classroom?
Well, in my classroom, we are a Microsoft district. We went one-to-one back in 2014. So all of the students have their own devices, and at the Online Academy, of course they do. But the tools that we're using, particularly with Microsoft, have been invaluable. In the very beginning, when the pandemic started, I was using Insights, and that was when it was in its infancy, but I was using Insights just to track students. There were some students we could not get a hold of, their families on the phone, but Insights was tracking them for me. So I knew they had been online looking at their lessons and participating. So it was like, no, they're okay because he was online. And that gave us the impetus to go out to the house and visit. So Insights has grown since then to give me better insights, if you will, into students. And so at the Online Academy, also we use Reflect, which is another great program, which allows students to, and I see them behind you, Mark, the cute little characters that they can choose from for their emotions, how they're feeling for the day. And the wonderful thing about a poll, and you normally wouldn't have kids letting people know, I feel really down today, I feel really frustrated, but it's all, you can set it so it's anonymous. So we can see how the class is feeling in a general picture, but I'm the one who sees the names behind each one, which gives me that opportunity to reach out to a student in private chat or a private video conference and say, hey, what can I do? Or is there something we can help with? So I think that is just the tip of the iceberg with what we do, because as Mark mentions, it's deeper than that, and SEL is the well-being is the end game, but it's all about building up those relationships. And through these kinds of tools, I can build up those kinds of relationships so they feel comfortable talking with me.
Yeah, Jennifer, talk a little bit about how Tammy's experience in the classroom can scale. I'm assuming that you see things from kind of a district level, or at least a building level, right? I mean, how can you take that when you have an extraordinary teacher like Tammy and replicate it to where this becomes kind of a cultural thing across a school or a district?
Yeah, I will say, we are also a Microsoft district, and really rather large. So
Just a bit.
I think one of the key pieces for us in our particular work in using a different stream, right? So yes, we have in the classroom, but in our particular department, we've continued to try and advance the mental health space is what we have really been doing. And so leveraging telehealth through Teams, utilizing bookings to be able to have those interactions and scheduled interactions with students or parents or families, whatnot. I think that the scaling and the socialization piece is so important in no matter whether it's MySpace or not MySpace, but in what I'm referring to. I guess there might be some people on the call that are too young to know what MySpace is.
I'm gonna say, showing our age there.
For MySpace, or my work stream, or for Tammy's work stream, but the socialization piece is so important. And what that means is identifying those champions and really helping to expand that, showing how this particular tool, you're able to utilize it to not only make your work more efficient, but make it a better experience for kids, make it a better experience for families. Our Microsoft team has been really so helpful in helping us in that socialization, teaching our staff to say, this is how this is going to make your work better so you can spend more time with kids. And so that's the ultimate goal, to be able to bring these efficiencies, to be able to identify what those kids' needs are, to be able to not have to play so much of a guessing game. Of course, this is a digital platform. This isn't your traditional one-to-one human connection. But what it does do I would say is that it meets kids where they are because they are digital natives and they're used to communicating feelings, and just their overall social network can be online. And so a lot of times where we as adults might not be as comfortable expressing our feelings online, they do so pretty readily. And so I think that helps with the socialization and the utilization piece, where teachers are able to, hey, everybody at one snap, at a glance, and a child doesn't have to call themselves out in front of a classroom, right? The teacher can follow up in a quiet space later to really help to create that safety, that felt safety. So that way a student, back to Tammy's point, builds that relationship, and to Mark, that continues to help them develop that language for those SEL pieces. To overall, it kind of brings it full circle to help with that that scaling piece.
Yeah, and Mark, I can only assume that there was an acceleration of use for all of these tools starting in March out of necessity, even if it wasn't necessarily something that was on people's radar. Talk a little bit about, from Microsoft's side, about how you've watched all these great innovations take place using the platform. I mean, it must be very a positive experience, right?
Well, I guess, yes and no. I mean, the context and the backdrop, has been significantly traumatic.
Sure.
And the blast zone of that trauma will ripple out for years to come. And if we go, if I just loop around back to this broad topic, one of the significant sort of benefits of a focus on well-being, developing social and emotional skills, is it actually helps to mitigate the harm of stress and trauma that is going to keep on flowing, because not all students, have been impacted equally across the globe. 1.6 billion. Certainly in the States, if you were in a group that was already experiencing difficulty, looping back to the question you asked originally about inclusion, if you're already part of a group that was struggling to be successful, to access opportunity, you've had a greater hardship over the last couple of years in terms of, do I have internet connectivity? Do I have a quiet place to learn? Do I have a device that's uniquely for me? Do I have access to quality teachers and teaching? So sure, on one hand, we've seen an explosion of digital use, but that's also grounded against our highlighting of existing inequities in education in the US, across the globe. And that's one of the things that we're working around. So it's why our products work online and offline, because we know that not every kid is going home to mum and dad's office to continue their homework. We know that doesn't happen. We know that battery life matters, because many schools were built long ago and don't have access to enough PowerPoints. We think through the things that we can do to contribute, not to solve the problem, but to contribute. So when we say empower every learner, that every means regardless of ability, disability, mobility, income, preferred language, identity. These are the big challenges that we hear from people. So long-winded answer. On one hand, yes, we've seen a scale, and the scale, to the points made by Tammy and Jennifer, have given us insights now which we haven't had before. It's allowed us as educators to listen at scale to students and teachers and families. It's allowed us to listen in their preferred language. It's allowed us to listen in the times and places that suit people, online and offline. And also the tools have allowed us to analyse what that means. And the cute little feeling monsters are a really good example. As a teacher, and I popped an answer in the question box, but as a teacher, you can see insights, which is the data engine behind Teams, the environment we're in now. And that tells you, as Tammy pointed out, what students are contributing, uploading, they're online, they're offline, how are they engaged with the content. But the Reflect tool, and I popped the link in the chat before, if you like, adds an emotional heartbeat above that. Self-reported well-being. So if Kevin has been prompted and is feeling a little bit anxious when an assignment's posted, we can keep providing reflect opportunities, which over time is going to allow Kevin to develop the insights around how emotions are the gatekeeper to cognition, how he thinks, to motivation, why he does what he does, and to attention, where does he place his most valuable resource. So we're really excited that Teams in this platform, free to educators, free to students, has got a tool like Reflect and insights to give holistic child information back to the teacher in the room to be able to make decisions to drive learning for all.
And Tammy, I mean, that's happening in real time for you. I mean, being able to create that. How, well, as great as a tool as it sounds, sometimes I would hear that, well, here's just something else that I need to do where I'm trying to focus on the child. But it seems like these sort of technologies are actually enhancing your ability to do that, right?
Yeah, these technologies work in the background. They do the work so I don't have to. So I can just open up my Teams app, which I think is an add-on. Is it still an add-on, Mark? You have to add the app?
Yep.
Yeah, so you have to add, someone was asking in chat, I saw. So you actually have to add the app to one of your tabs. But once you've added that, it works in the background. And when I open it up, it's just as Mark says, there's the complete picture. I can dive down to specific students, specific days. The whole month, I can get a huge picture over all of my class. So that's marvelous. But Teams itself really gives me some opportunities as an educator to set up, because part of what I feel is if I organize things well ahead of time, students are going to feel more confident. They know what's happening, they know what to expect, and they know what kind of teacher I am. So in my Teams, I actually have a channel that's called the Minecraft channel, where the students can go in and they can, chat with each other on Minecraft and work on projects together. I have a student masterpiece channel where they can go in and post designs they've made or things they've drawn at home. I have kids who are auteurs who do short videos. They post them in there so they can showcase what they do. So just using Teams as that kind of platform to build social relationships has been really beneficial. But yeah, most of this is in the background, although, as I think my friends will agree, planning is key. You really have to think about, how am I going to set this up so that a student walking in says, oh, I know what I need to do today. So in Teams, my students know if they see the dragon announcement, that's things to do today, and everything's listed there for them, so they know what to watch for.
Now, Jennifer, I'll assume that you use these tools in this platform on a more of a administrative side too, right? You mentioned earlier about the ideas of telehealth, and I know in conversations I've been having that one of the great innovations is maybe not in group conversations, but one-to-ones in terms of parent-teacher conferences, in terms of a lot of special education dynamics that used to happen in person. They're finding that remote actually maybe works better when it comes to some dynamics. Could you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I think remote has opened up a great tool for us in the education space, really in anything, but I think more readily in the education space, because we were so used to brick and mortar. You're coming here to the meeting. It has provided another option, another opportunity for families to be able to for us to be able to accommodate families to meet their needs. However, so it works really great to be able to do that. However, I will continue to touch on what Mark talked about the equity and the access piece. Not everybody's, mom or dad or auntie or granny has the capability or the ability to be able to log on via the video chat, to be able to attend that meeting, to have that particular phone call or that parent conference. So I want to keep calling that out. And I appreciate Mark for bringing that to the table in this conversation, because one of the things that we have come to realize in our particular work, especially with telehealth or with anything where we're doing one-on-ones or small groups with students and families, that presents itself a real challenge. And identifying ways to make those things accessible and meaningful for families where it doesn't feel alienating is really important. And that also, I think, ties back into the socialization piece, giving, scaling not only within our organizations, but scaling for families and students, within your communities and your organization, to be able to give, in education, we had to learn how to use, a lot of people use Zoom first, and then, Microsoft, and then, popping into all these different platforms, and then finding the one that meets the needs best for your organization or for what you do. But think about it, families were doing that same stuff when they didn't use FaceTime. They don't use they don't have internet on their phone. Or think of it this way, they may have limited minutes, right? Think of that. How many of us have unlimited on our phones, and, hey, I just watch the videos or do whatever on my phone and don't even think twice about it. Not everyone has that luxury. And so that is something that we have to continue to keep at the forefront of our minds, so we continue to bring everyone along as we move and transform education and into these new spaces, to ensure that everyone has the opportunity to thrive in these spaces.
And what a huge challenge that is, Mark. I mean, when you bring everybody into that picture and all the various different aspects when it comes to digital equity, even beyond just here in North America, United States, talk a little bit about how to accomplish that. I mean, I know I've read and talked a lot about, synchronous versus asynchronous dynamics when it looks at platforms. Can you talk a little bit to how you see that equity piece being addressed across the spectrum?
Sure. And I'd start off by saying, equity, at its heart is about success for all. For me as a teacher, that's what it means, success for all. So I don't want anyone to get hung up on the word equity and to be embroiled in this is about success for all, which, sure, it's complicated. It always has been. I've been in education 30 years ago was my first classroom, and it was complicated then. MIT did a survey last year they published. They were curious why teachers were stressed. They knew they were stressed around the push to remote learning. They knew that, but they were curious around what exactly. And sure, workload was one. The second one was the breaking of the protective personal connections that teachers needed to feel good and be well. Connections. They missed that too. In the push to remote learning, it impacted them greatly. No gossiping in the car park after staff meetings, to debrief and knowledge exchange in tacit exchange. But the number one, why were teachers stressed? They were stressed about increasing inequities for learners, because that's what teachers care about, success for all. And when we can create conditions where it's successful for one, we can scale it to many. So inclusive practices, they recognise that no one child learns the same way, at the same pace, brings the same experiences, has the same opportunity. Every child has the same potential. Not every child has the same opportunity. So the question around how do you navigate that? Well, how we navigate that is with great intent, redesigning our tools, listening to educators. They need help with supporting students to become more fluent readers. Let's build reading progress in and fold it into teams. Why put it into teams? Because it reduces cognitive overload for all students. Does that particularly help neurodiverse students? Yes. Does it help all students? Yes. Everybody wins. When we built in transcription services in Teams, so that at the end of your classroom or your professional learning, you've got a full transcript. Does that help you if you're a English language learner? Yes. But does it help you if you're just overwhelmed? Yes. Or I can have live captions running right now. And if Jennifer decides that, she's fatigued translating in her head my Australian accent, she can turn on and see those words at the bottom of the screen. Does that benefit everyone? Yes, it does. So sometimes the challenges learners face are permanent. You know, it's an identified learning disability. Sometimes they're situational. When I find myself in another country, I'm not illiterate. I'm just situationally illiterate for a moment. I'm not stupid. I have the same skills and abilities. The context is different. I need a little bit of extra support. So in designing inclusive practices, inclusive classrooms, inclusive approaches, this is all about, number one, giving every kid the best seat in the house. Number two, giving them the tools and the scaffolds that they can dial up and dial down that suit them when they need it. This is not about a suite of remediation tools. This is about a collection of features hardwired into all of our products that allow every learner to be successful. And a quick example would be you're playing Minecraft, you're struggling with the text, Immersive Reader is built in and free in whatever language you choose. That's inclusion.
Yeah. Now, this kind of brings up thoughts to me on another great education phrase, which is professional development and PD. And now BP, before the pandemic, when I would write about education technology, that was always a big issue. And I guess it's got to say it. I mean, teacher hesitancy to using technologies and new platforms versus what we refer to as thwatties. Like, that's the way we've always done it. Tammy, do you see a change now because of the forced adoptions of these technologies when we went to remote, and now going back into whatever our new hybrid is? Is that something that we don't need to talk about anymore? Do you find that your fellow educators get the they get the idea that these technologies work? And if not, what are some of the techniques that you use to share the benefits?
Great questions. We still need to be talking about this. It's still an evolving kind of thing. We still have people who are not digital natives who don't see the benefits. And I think the big conversation, as when I first started teaching, is show me what it looks like in your classroom. So I've actually, since the pandemic, trained over 14,000 teachers in this fashion online.
Wow.
And so, but showing them what I do in my classroom, how does this technology make my life easier? Right? So letting them see, oh, I use Flipgrid if I want students to give me their opinion, or no, to show me how to do a math problem, right? And so, but students also have this choice and voice. They go in, they can use a whiteboard, digital whiteboard. They don't have to use their camera if they're shy, but they still have to talk, right? So they have all these different choice and voice when you use a tool like Flipgrid. And when teachers see how it looks in a classroom, then they're like, oh, I didn't know that could work. Normally, the old style teaching teachers about technology was usually click on file, and this is what it does under here, and click on, right? But actually seeing what it looks like in a working classroom. I've been in a program with NCCE where we're live lessons with Minecraft with Texas teachers. And so we go in and we teach a curriculum lesson, like the last one we just did was on social studies, all on geography. So my partner, Randy Hawkins, and I go into a K-5 classroom. Well, we had like 63 classrooms last time. And all the students are tuned in, and we're showing the teachers, here's how you introduce the lesson. Here's the vocabulary. Let the students get into Minecraft. We identified the Minecraft mavens in class, the ones who are going to help the teachers, because the teachers are a little shy about that tool. And I think that's another thing. Teachers are a little afraid, hesitant to let students take the lead sometimes, right?
Right.
And I think when we model that, because some of my students actually join us on these, and they're the mavens in the background giving help to other teachers. So I kind of model that for them. But when they allow the students to do that, then the students are helping other students and helping the teacher, and it's just a beautiful thing. So I think we need to continue the conversation. I think we're ever changing, ever evolving, ever growing, and more aware of what students' needs are. I mean, as a teacher, you've got to just keep getting more tools in your arsenal so you're ready for the next learning style or the next student, because every student is different. Every student is different from sometimes every hour, right? Sometimes their needs change, and you have to be able to meet that. So we got to continue the education. That's what I say.
Yeah, Jennifer, does that ring true for you as well in terms of the idea of continued professional development and encouraging all the faculty to begin to enjoy the benefits of these platforms and tools.
Yes, absolutely. And I think Tammy hit the nail on the head in saying that, right, it's about showing them how that tool can be useful, but then also kind of training and guiding them through the utilization of that tool. And I think what this has really brought about for all teachers is the fact that now teachers are really able to be true facilitators of the learning, as opposed to maybe just some lecturers. Now we've always had that, right? There's been different styles of teachers out there, but what this does, what tools that are brought to the classroom through Microsoft, or really any other platform, but really through Microsoft, since we're talking about that now, is it helps to really engage students in their learning in a different way. Now, as the teacher being the facilitators, students can be explorers in their own learning. They really engage and they're able to figure things out. It also helps teachers in real time to be able to differentiate really on the fly, probably more quickly than they've ever been able to do before, to be able to differentiate their learning, to be able to group students by abilities, to be able to add them to have them grouped in by strengths, or pair them up in ways that someone who needs a little bit more help and who's very strong in this area. It really changes the dynamic of the classroom, whereas before, hey, this is what my plan was in the set time, and I'm going to do the best that I can. Now these tools, again, kind of going back to that insight piece, insight not only to their learning, their engagement, where they are in the content, but as well kind of bringing it back to the SEL piece. Now we're able to identify those pieces for student learning and really kind of get a holistic picture. And what that does for teachers in terms of professional learning and professional development is helps them to become better teachers, become really, truly, I think what it does is helps them to access why they truly got into the profession, to really be there with students and go on the journey of with them, giving it to them. Now they're on that journey and watching students blossom, and that's really a beautiful.
Yeah. Now, Mark, along with professional development, the idea of data and assessments maybe don't necessarily fall in line when you talk about the idea of well-being and how to kind of jibe those two together. I'll put you on the hot seat first to talk a little bit about how you can take raw numbers and not only turn it into information and knowledge, but almost emotional support.
Yeah, absolutely. And just on the professional learning, if people are following on the recording or also live at the moment, I've dropped some links in for some coursework which is available free for educators. There's one on social and emotional learning if you're interested in Reflect and the use of that data, which ties into your question. Thanks, Kevin. Emotion is information, right? I mean, the word emotion means to be in motion, to be changing and to shift and alter, and every emotion matters and serves a purpose. So when we developed Reflect, it contains 52 of these little feeling monsters. Each one of those, if you like, is actually a data point. And over time, as students engage in a reflection, and it's not always how am I feeling? Yeah, the teacher can customize that. It might be how confident do I feel about this concept of Newton's law, or it might be how connected do I feel to my classmates. It might be after a break time, how do I feel after playtime, or it might be around a whole bunch of other topics. We've just built it into OneNote class notebook, which will be rolling out within Teams again. So Teams becomes that one place for gathering information, which allows a teacher to make the judgment. The assessment sits always, which is the judgment, sits with the skilled professional, the expert in learning design, the teacher. The tools that we architect are there to help listen at scale, analyze at scale, to bubble up insights, highlight trends, or at times sort of not omissions but variances, But at the end of the day, these are in service of the teachers making the professional judgment. So one of the, I think Tammy's touched on insights quite a few times. And I think as an educator, for me, like I wish I was back in the classroom with access to that kind of information. I've always gathered that kind of information, but it's always been analog, which has meant that it's been restrictive in terms of identifying trends. And of course, for some schools and districts, this kind of approach sets them up in the future to much more advanced analytics, predictive analytics. And whenever I hear an amazing story, it kind of like just makes me go, wow, like Surrey school districts up, I think they're in Ontario, who across their entire district have got a visual map which shows in colours the level of happiness of the schools in their district. You know, the big question, how is my school feeling? And it matters so much, because when we're feeling optimistic, when our brains are dropping levels of cortisol, when we're getting, you know, the oxytocin, where we're getting the adrenaline, when we're feeling good and in control, we're primed for deep learning. So the analytics aren't just good for identifying where are problems and why do we need to intervene. The analytics are equally good at identifying where are we succeeding, where are we flourishing, and what can we learn from that. Let's use the information to get more of the good stuff.
It almost sounds like the assessment now is on the educator as opposed to the student, which I know for me, the less traditional assessment, the better my well-being would have been as when I was a student, for sure. Tammy, give us a little bit of a real-world perspective of what Mark was just talking about there. I mean, do you see that having an effect, and where do you see that affecting the way that we actually assess students going forward?
Wow. So yes, Insights has been wonderful in assessing their social emotional, absolutely, and their activity. But also, and I agree, too many assessments, but setting up an environment where assessments are more engaging, using a Flipgrid, using a Microsoft Forms quiz, which teachers can create and put right into Teams, and that are super simple. That I find really helps students a lot. What I love, and you've all used this before in Teams, is when I give an assignment in Teams, I have a great space where I can let students know, I can leave personal messages for them and interact with them, and I can do digital inking and write up on their copy. So that's kind of what was missing for me when I first started teaching online, was how do I interact with my students? I used to do journals, and they'd turn them in at the end of the week, and I would take them home on the weekend and write in all of them. But now in Teams, I can do that digitally, which is beautiful. It actually is a little faster, and my hand isn't quite so tired. But I love the fact that I can give them that kind of feedback. I also love that in a Teams meeting, I can make a student a presenter, and they can showcase something they've done to the class. So we can still have that presentation practice, right? And I need to mention Presenter Coach in PowerPoint Online, where students can actually go on. Mine have done this and practice their presentation. And if you've not done it, you need to play with it. It's great for adults too. But what it does is it records you giving your presentation, and it uses AI to check your rate, to see if you're using filler words, to see if you're using words that aren't quite proper or appropriate. And then at the end, you get this wonderful report of, how you did, and you can, practice over and over again. And the students get that kind of input and are much more confident when I give them the screen to present. And I find that those kinds of assessments, when I can see them actually presenting and talking about what they know, phenomenal. When we do math, for example, and I'm a PowerPoint girl, and I'll have a math problem on my screen, I'll ask them to take control of my screen, and they will digitally ink the math while everyone else is watching and showcase. So just having these kinds of tools really makes assessment better, makes assessment less scary, and makes it more interactive. So I'm not super fond of the standardized assessments, but we get a lot of data just using the kinds of tools. I think teachers just need to know the tools are there, and once they see how we use them, then it's like, why didn't I think of that?
Yeah. And Jennifer, not to put you back into the big district seat. Again, those sort of tools I'm imagining may be difficult to scale into where when you're at an administrative level, it's like, well, how do I take that data and put it form and show my community, show my district or my schools some sort of growth when everyone's used to the traditional growth of, I know, especially in the state of Texas, there's always a lot of talk about state assessments. Give us a little bit where you see this progressing, hopefully.
Yeah, so I think both Mark and Tammy hit on two really key points, whether it is emotional, I'll call it data, or and more analytical, right? Content related data. It's all important because our children don't exist in one world or the other. They, education and school is a part of both of them. And so our district, and I think so many other districts, continue to use data, or are beginning to and continuing to find value in that emotional data. And so whether it comes from something like Insights or Reflect or any other application that school districts are using, those are, I think those are scalable in terms of seeing how they are beneficial to, I guess sometimes the way I say it, our schools' bottom lines. And our schools' bottom lines are making sure we are helping students develop into healthy, well-rounded people. And ultimately, our job is to get them graduated, to become successful people in their community, to whether it's in this community or another community, to where they can grow and thrive and be successful human beings. And we can't have one thing without the other. One of them measures our effectiveness kind of in that classroom on that content, and the other measures how we're doing to care for our students. And so I think they are both so important, and it's a matter of school districts continuing to see the value in those and recognizing that they're two sides of the same coin for us to ultimately do a great job at what we came to do in this industry, and that's to help our students grow and thrive and become successful citizens. So
yeah. Well, I knew the most difficult part of my job here this afternoon would be to end the conversation at the top of the hour. I know we could go on for a long time, and there's so many, different avenues that we can go towards. But what I'd like to do is wrap up the end of this conversation about talking about the future and where each of you see these technologies continuing to flourish, hopefully, and also as we go back to whatever normal is, although Mark, you did mention earlier that normal maybe wasn't that good to begin with, but let's look forward and see where you think your role as a teacher, as an administrator, will continue to thrive. Tammy, I will start with you.
Okay, well, I think one of the insights I've had in the last 2 years is I've always tried to build relationships with families, but the last 2 years, it's been even more vital so I can check in with them as well as their students. So having the tools like a Microsoft Teams conversation, we do all of our conferences on Microsoft Teams just like this, and I'm face to face with families. Being able to reach out and talk to them like that, especially when you've got families who don't have cars, families who can't make it in. I have families that use Microsoft Teams on their smartphone, right? Because they don't have internet access, but they've got a phone where they can do that. So I think that's going to be a thing of the future where I continue, especially for me, continuing that kind of relationship with families. I use Remind so they can text me back and forth because everyone seems to have a cell phone, but not internet access all the time. But for education in the future for students, yeah, the amount of data that we get has just been phenomenal, but the tools, what we're able to do for students' well-being with these kinds of tools, I just see it progressing. And forgive me, Mark, I'm going to compliment Microsoft, but Microsoft is so receptive when you email or text somebody at Microsoft and say, hey, have you considered this or that? And they'll be like, oh, put that into the voice thing, and we'll upload it. That sounds like a great idea. And so you get products like when we first started, OneNote was awesome, but we couldn't put YouTube videos into OneNote. Boom, YouTube videos are now in OneNote. And that's, speaking of equitable issues, that's also a great product because it's enveloped in Teams, but in OneNote, a student can download their OneNote and use it offline, right? They don't have to have internet connectivity. They can download their lessons into that OneNote and then do their work at the site. I've had students come to the school parking lot, download their lessons, and go back home and work. So, I think another thing for the future of education is to realize you got to put in the work, right? To quote how many people, it's all about putting in the work. So if we put in the work to organize and utilize the tools that are going to help us, and if we model for students and families and other teachers how that's going to help and continue building relationships, of course, that just goes on and on. It's in the past, it's now, and it's in the future. It's just building those relationships so the students are comfortable, the families are comfortable talking to us, and we can be there for them.
Right. And then just these platforms are enabling that and just continue to make it easier. If we're going to go back to whatever normal is, these tools should stick around and use the best. That's
they shouldn't be put by the side. We should carry them over. Absolutely.
Yeah. Jennifer, do you have any forward thoughts instead of final thoughts?
The future is bright. So long as people like everyone gathered here to continue to utilize and integrate what we've learned, where we've been, and not neglecting where we've been, right? Because there's some valuable stuff to bring along, and to continue to leverage any of the technologies that we have here to be able to have a more enriched experience for our students and families, to open the doors of our schools, open the windows, open it all up for our students and families to really create that sense of community, to create that sense of belonging, because educating our students and building these strong communities is part of all of us. And so I think that we continue to leverage these various platforms brought to us by Microsoft. And I'll call out what Tammy said. Yes, our Microsoft team is so receptive. We ask for something and they make it happen, because what we're asking for is to try and make it better for our students and families. And so they recognize that. And I love knowing that our teams are there to say, hey, we want to help you remove barriers. You find one, let's figure it out. And I think that's one of the things that we can all continue to do and grow. But I'm super confident that the future is bright with all the smart people here today. There's a lot of great things coming forward for our students and families, for sure.
Great. Well, thank you. And Mark, why don't we leave you with the final word here? Give us wrap it up for us.
Yeah, I would just plus 1,000 to everything that's been said. I would just call out again, I popped more links in the text chat. These are free tools. So one thing I can tell you that Microsoft is committed to doing, and that's providing non-stigmatizing free tools and free features to allow every learner to be able to reach their full potential. As I said, potential is equally distributed, opportunity is not. So even if you're a non-Microsoft or whatever your flavor of technology is, you'll find in the links completely free tools to help with reading, to help with maths, to help with communication, to help with vision, to help with translation, because it's critical, to the point that we've all made. Schools aren't places just where people go to learn. Schools are places where we create and recreate the society that we all want to live in. And when everybody is included, when all voices and perspectives are equally valued and elevated, we all benefit individually, collectively, and even economically. So the future for us is around continuing to double down on how do we help schools and teachers in every classroom everywhere accelerate learning, catch up, keep up, get ahead, be ready for work, life, and civic participation, focused on well-being and tools which help educators to support the well-being of teachers as well as learners, and also continue to readjust our tools and build new tools to make sure we meet the needs of diverse learner populations.
Well, I know I believe I heard you say before we started the conversation you're headed over to Tibet.
Correct. Yep. On Sunday, heading off to London.
So then that always traditionally has been usually in January, and it's
Right.
usually the beginning of each year where you would see a lot of these tools in action. and Microsoft for the last several years. I mean, I guess I remember the Minecraft acquisition was one of the first big splashes there. But each year the addition. So this is the first in-person bet since everything got started.
Right, exactly. I think my last one was 2019.
Yeah,
it was my last face-to-face bet.
So, but with all of the insights that you've just mentioned here, that the continuance of these new tools and data analytics and artificial intelligence, making even these, being able to analyze these things and make it smarter. I think we're leaving. I hope we're leaving our audience here with the glass half full. I know I certainly feel it, and hearing the insights from educators and experts such as yourselves, I think is going to help us all going forward. So once again, thank you all for taking the time this afternoon.
Thank you.
And I'd also like to thank the audience members for joining us as well with your questions and your insights. As a reminder, you'll be getting an email within the next few days that contains a link to this recording along with the slides. Thanks again for participating, and have a great day.